Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Genesis chapter 44, verse 1 through chapter 45, verse 28. He instructed the servant who was over his household to fill the sacks of the men with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with money for his grain. He did as Joseph instructed. When morning came, the men and their donkeys were sent off. They had not gone very far from the city, when Joseph said to the servant who was over his household, "Pursue the men at once. When you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid good with evil? Doesn't my master drink from this cup and use it for divination? You have done wrong.' When the man overtook them, he spoke these words to them. They answered him, 'Why does my lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Look, the money that we found in the mouths of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. Why then would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If one of us has it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my lord's slaves.' He replied, 'You have suggested your own punishment. The one who has it will become my slave, but the rest of you will go free.' So each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. Then the man searched. He began with the oldest and finished with the youngest. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack. They all tore their clothes. Then each man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. So Judah and his brothers came back to Joseph's house. He was still there, and they threw themselves to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, 'What did you think you were doing? Don't you know that a man like me can find out things like this by divination?' Judah replied, 'What can we say to my lord? What can we speak? How can we clear ourselves? God has exposed the sin of your servants. We are now your lord's slaves, we and the one in whose possession the cup was found.' But Joseph said, 'Far be it from me to do this. The man in whose hand the cup was found will become my slave, but the rest of you may go back to your father in peace.' Then Judah approached him and said, 'My lord, please allow your servant to speak a word with you. Please do not get angry with your servant, for you are just like Pharaoh.' My lord asked his servants, 'Do you have a father or a brother?' We said to my lord, 'We have an aged father, and there is a young boy who was born when our father was old. The boy's brother is dead. He is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him.' Then you told your servants, 'Bring him down to me so I can see him.' We said to my lord, 'The boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves his father will die.' But you said to your servants, 'If your youngest brother does not come down with you, you will not see my face again.' When we returned to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my lord. Then our father said, 'Go back and buy us a little food.' But we replied, 'We cannot go down there. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go, for we won't be permitted to see the man's face if our youngest brother is not with us.' Then your servant, my father, said to us, 'You know that my wife gave me 2 sons. The first disappeared, and I said, "He has surely been torn to pieces. I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and an accident happens to him, then you will bring down my gray hair in tragedy to the grave.' So now, when I return to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, his very life is bound up in his son's life. When he sees the boy is not with us, he will die, and your servants will bring down the gray hair of your servant, our father, in sorrow to the grave. Indeed, your servant pledged security for the boy with my father, saying, 'If I do not bring him back to you, then I will bear the blame before my father all my life.' So now, please let your servant remain as my lord's slave instead of the boy. As for the boy, let him go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I couldn't bear to see my father's pain." Joseph was no longer able to control himself before all his attendants, so he cried out, "Make everyone go out from my presence." No one remained with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers, who wept loudly. The Egyptians heard it, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers could not answer him because they were dumbfounded before him. Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be upset and do not be angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For these past 2 years, There has been famine in the land, and for 5 more years there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to preserve you on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it is not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me an advisor to Pharaoh, lord over all his household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Now go up to my father quickly and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not delay. You will live in the land of Goshen, and you will be near me. You, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, and everything you have. I will provide you with food there, because there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise you would become poor. You, your household, and everyone who belongs to you. You and my brother Benjamin can certainly see with your own eyes that I really am the one who speaks to you. So tell my father about all my honor in Egypt, and about everything you have seen, but bring my father down here quickly." Then he threw himself on the neck of his brother Benjamin and Benjamin wept on his neck. He kissed all his brothers and wept over them. After this, his brothers talked with him. Now it was reported in the household of Pharaoh, "Joseph's brothers have arrived." It pleased Pharaoh and his servants. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and go to the land of Canaan. Get your father and your households and come to me. Then I will give you the best land in Egypt, and you will eat the best of the land. You are also commanded to say, do this, take for yourselves wagons from the land of Egypt, for your little ones and for your wives. Bring your father and come. Don't worry about your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt will be yours." So the sons of Israel did as he said. Joseph gave them wagons, as Pharaoh had instructed, and he gave them provisions for the journey. He gave sets of clothes to each one of them. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 sets of clothes. To his father he sent the following: 10 donkeys loaded with the best product of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, food, and provisions for his father's journey. Then he sent his brothers on their way, and they left. He said to them, "As you travel, don't be overcome with fear." So they went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They told him, "Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt." Jacob was stunned, for he did not believe them. But when they related to him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, their father Jacob's spirit revived. Then Israel said, "Enough, my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Joseph's confession to his brothers, gave off real "I'm you from the future" vibes of like, quick, I have to explain this plot to you that's going to happen over the course of the next 5 years. So it's fun. I bet his brothers were flabbergasted and just vacillating between terror and wonder at the whole situation of having Joseph back alive after them trying to kill him and subsequently selling him into slavery. But then he becomes the Lord of Egypt, and I bet. Well, it says right there that his father went through something similar. In Genesis 45:26, Jacob was stunned, for he did not believe them. But the weight of the evidence, that is, everything Joseph told them, and the wagons sent to transport Jacob, was enough. And yeah, up to this point, Jacob had been living in perpetual grief, and he stopped that there. Their father Jacob's spirit revived. So, pretty cool. Yeah. And one of his brothers intercedes for Benjamin when the blame is dealt to him for stealing Joseph's cup. I think it was Judah. Yeah, in 44:18, then Judah approached him and said, "My lord, please allow your servant to speak a word with you." So, far be it from treating their brother like a scapegoat and only preserving their own hide. Judah steps in and says, "Take me instead." So, pretty cool. Character progression, for lack of a better word, of Judah there. Yeah. It's pretty awesome. I think Joseph's story in particular illustrates the biblical principle of God causing everything to work out for the good of him and those who love him, kind of thing. In 45:5, "Now do not be upset, and do not be angry with yourselves, because you sold me here, for God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." And 45:8, "So now it is not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me an advisor to Pharaoh, lord over all his household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt." So, yeah, pretty neat. Carrying on. Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 36. Now, when Jesus heard this, he went away from there privately in a boat to an isolated place. But when the crowd heard about it, they followed him on foot from the towns. As he got out, he saw the large crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. When evening arrived, his disciples came to him, saying, "This is an isolated place, and the hour is already late. Send the crowds away so that they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But he replied, "They don't need to go. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish. "Bring them here to me," he replied. Then he instructed the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. He gave them to the disciples, who in turn gave them to the crowds. They all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up the broken pieces left over, 12 baskets full. Not counting women and children, there were about 5,000 men who ate. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he dispersed the crowds. And after he sent the crowds away, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already far from land, was taking a beating from the waves because the wind was against it. As the night was ending, Jesus came to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost," and cried out with fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them. "Have courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, order me to come to you on the water." Then he said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind, he became afraid and started to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You have little faith. Why did you doubt?" When they went up into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." After they had crossed over, they came to the land at Gennesaret. When the people there recognized him, they sent word into all the surrounding area, and they brought all their sick to him. They begged him if they could only touch the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. Yeah, so you have Jesus feeding the 5,000 here. And I think this particular miracle is highlighted among others because it's to show that Jesus is a prophet like Moses, not merely a prophet, though. But in the same way that God fed the children of Israel with manna from heaven, so too Jesus came and fed the crowds with bread and fish. So, and then you have Jesus walking on the water, which further illustrates his control over the power of nature. Just as the Lord caused the Red Sea to be split and the children of Israel walked on dry ground in the Exodus story, so too Jesus walked on the water and even caused Peter to walk on the water as well. Carrying on, Psalm chapter 18, verses 37 through 50. I chase my enemies and catch them. I do not turn back until I wipe them out. I beat them to death. They fall at my feet. You give me strength for battle. You make my foes kneel before me. You make my enemies retreat. I destroy those who hate me. They cry out, but there is no one to help them. They cry out to the Lord, but he does not answer them. I grind them as fine wind-blown dust. I beat them underfoot like clay in the streets. You rescue me from a hostile army. You make me a leader of nations. People over whom I had no authority are now my subjects. When they hear of my exploits, they submit to me. Foreigners are powerless before me. Foreigners lose their courage. They shake with fear as they leave their strongholds. The Lord is alive. My protector is praiseworthy. The God who delivers me is exalted as king. The one true God completely vindicates me. He makes nations submit to me. He delivers me from my enemies. You snatch me away from those who attack me. You rescue me from violent men. So I will give you thanks before the nations, O Lord. I will sing praises to you. He gives his chosen king magnificent victories. He is faithful to his chosen ruler, to David and his descendants forever. Yeah. So David's giving thanks to the Lord for military victories that he was able to achieve because of the Lord. And finally, Proverbs chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. I will guide you in the way of wisdom, and I will lead you in upright paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered, and when you run, you will not stumble. Hold on to instruction, do not let it go. Protect it, because it is your life. Yeah. So, thanks for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. See ya.